Welcome to Fossil Creek. I'm Max. I'll be your garden coach today. And today we're going over having a tropical garden in your yard. And that's pretty easy because we've got a ton of plants and not all of them are tropicals. But if you don't tell anybody, they don't have to know. And they look very tropical. So we've got, if you say, well, I want it to live through the winter, we've got tropical looking things that go through the winter, and they're even evergreen. If you say I don't have enough sun, we have a bunch of shade things, and some of them will actually make it through the winter too. So, and of course you can mix and match, and so we've got a bunch. Here's my what are these, about 26 lines per page. There's like 30 of them. There's 30 more. So we don't have it, and that doesn't include, and I'm going to make it up later. I didn't have time. I've been doing caretaker duty at home. My wife broke her arm, so and of course her right arm. She wouldn't, break her left arm. That'd be too convenient. So anyway. But I'll make this up, and there are a lot of plants that didn't make the list that would be contributors too. So it's a matter of your taste and your space. And first of all, I'll describe a little bit about tropical look and plant talk or plant language, what they say. So, what's one of the things that plants say tropical with? Big leaves. If you see big leaves, you automatically think, I bet that's a tropical. And we'll go through some examples of that. And of course, there's another thing. What do variegated leaves say? Well, to me, they say exotic. If you see something with variegated leaves, you think, ooh, that's exotic. Multiple colors in the leaf, and see, that would be variegated. This, just a common airplane plant. Variegated leaves, when you see those, it's not your ordinary solid green or solid any color. It's got multiple colors, so that to me says exotic. And of course, you may not think of some of these things as exotic because you've lived with them your whole life, you've seen them your whole life, but keep in mind that they've come from all over the world. So, see, something is ordinary and ubiquitous as periwinkles. Well, where'd they come from? Well, see, some people call them vinca, but if you look in some books that are accurate, one of my favorites, in there it's listed as Madagascar. Oop. Well, the breeze is up. I made it out here without it blowing off, but now our time has come. If you're wondering where you are, it's Texas, the wind's blowing. So, but anyway, it's listed as Madagascar periwinkle. So that's where it hails from, and that's why it's so tolerant of heat, sun, and drought. So, and yeah, in fact, periwinkles, even in here in a little 4-inch plant, they can go completely bone dry and they won't be wilted. Now they will eventually wilt, but they can get to a bone dry state and still be up. A zinnia won't do that, but a periwinkle will. And if they do begin to wilt, you water them, they respond really quick. So very tough plant. Let's see. So the tropical things appearance, basically we're going to be dealing with foliage and flowers, and in each you've got a wide assortment of texture, form, and color. So there's all kind of exotic possibilities. And let me see. So I guess we'll start off with, let's do some shade things. If you say, I don't have that much sun, can it look neat in the shade? Absolutely. Because, understand, in North Texas, shade's a relative thing. So if it's shade under trees or whatever, the sun is not blocked, it's filtered. So there's still a fair amount of sunlight coming through to sustain things in shade. And of course, not surprisingly, a lot of tropicals, you know, they're from like rainforests or whatever, and they're under trees. So they're made to perform in shade, and who'd have thunk? Why would you think they might have big leaves? To harvest that light, to do the best job of it. So there are things like caladiums, which are.
Now, are these annuals?
These are annuals. Now you could dig them, but they're from. I think these are from like Brazil, you know, that area. So they're not adapted to cold. In fact, the little root bulb, it's only an inch under the soil, so they're not resistant to cold. You could dry them, dig them and dry them and store them in dry sphagnum. Most people just replace them. But not only are they big leaves tropical, but they can be dramatic. In fact, this one, you can kind of halfway see through it. Any caladium that you can see through, it's not for sun, it's for shade. There are caladiums that can do full sun, but if it's one of these, it's translucent, it would scorch in full sun. But a good assortment of colors, that's one of my favorites. And another. And of course, different varieties, bunch of different varieties of caladiums. And of course, to go with those, another neat foliage thing, coleus, which you kind of get into color and texture and form, is neat. These guys, a lot of them can do sun or shade, and neat textures and colors, and kind of neat names too. That one's wasabi. I'm not making this up. And of course, all kinds of. And of course, some common things that you could use too. Everybody's used to seeing Purple Heart. This one's one with a little bit of variegation in it. And that's a dependable perennial, typically in January on a typical winter, if the winter isn't canceled. It'll disappear, but comes back reliably. It'll take sun all day long, but since it's just a foliage plant, it'll work with just shade too. Very tough and a neat. Everybody knows I'm a big fan of contrast, you know. Neat contrast. And of course, that's another thing that to me kind of speaks exotic. But and of course, airplane plant. You know, that guy, it's an annual, but it can do shade just fine. In fact, right now it could probably take full sun, but it's not going to do it in July. But it could take full shade anytime. Same. And then there's one that's called reverse, and it has instead of the white being in the middle, the white's on the outside edge. So some neat varieties of that one. And let's see. Of course, another common thing for shade, and this is a hardy fern, holly fern. It'll do shade, and of course, it is evergreen. It'll make a clump about 3 feet by 3 feet. And in case you get one or have one or see one and you see all the bumps, brown bumps on the back of the leaf, that's not a scale insect. It's making spores. That's how they reproduce themselves. That's part of the plant. So no alarm needed on that one. But of course, this one we have a bunch of our hardy plants that, you could say, well, this is just plain Jane green, but plain Jane green or dark green, it helps to set off colors. So that's one of the neat things that it does. And it's there the whole time, evergreen, so you'll have the form of it even in the winter. And when would you like to feel tropical? The winter's a good time to feel tropical. Yeah. And of course, here's another tropical plant, Persian shield. Super neat colors. It'll take some sun or shade. And another thing that's just begging to have some contrast around it. Or, you might have something that echoed. That's called an echo, when the same color appears in a plant in proximity. And let's see. So a variegated ginger. So it's got it all. It's got big leaves. It's got variegation. It's got neat color. It'll do the shade and brighten it up. And that one's probably, I think that's about a zone 9. We're zone 8. So that one could, on some winters, would need protection. Or, of course, the other compromise is if you want to put these in pots and you can protect them, you're set. And in this shade category, some of these, they're in 2 categories. The other category I've already mentioned looks tropical, but it's not. A lot of these looks tropical, but it's not. Hardy, a shade plant, a Cuba, super neat foliage, very cold hardy. If it gets really cold, it'll wilt a little bit. When it warms up, pops right back up.
I've heard before, like when it gets cold, can you put like a plastic bag over them, or you really need to take them and put them inside?
Well, if it's a tropical, it's better if you could, move it to a sheltered location. I wouldn't do a plastic bag because that, the plastic will get very cold. So best if you can move them. Of course, something like an Akuba, you're not going to have to. It's going to take as cold as we've got. It's a shade plant, and also, as with a lot of shade plants, low water use. So doesn't need water very often because, as with most shade plants, anything in shade is not using as much water because it's in a kind of a benign situation. The more sun a plant is in, you have begonias that could be in sun or shade. The one in sun is going to use a lot more water than the one that's in shade. If you water them according to what the one in the sun needs and you water the one in the shade the same, probably going to end up rotting because it'll stay too soggy because the plant doesn't use as much, and obviously it doesn't evaporate as fast in the shade. So, and of course, here's another, kind of looks tropical because it's got a big leaf. And this one is a common name leopard plant, although this one has no spots. But it's a perennial, it's evergreen, does well in the shade, and it's a, depending on which book you look in, the botanical name could be Farfugium or Ligularia. So, but comes in different, there's probably, in the trade, there's probably 4 or 5 different varieties available. And then in the fall, it will send up a spike and have little yellow daisy flowers, which is cute. And it could be November, it could be December, somewhere in there. But a neat plant, loves the shade. Sure. Yeah. And the good thing there is the good thing about putting things in containers is you're not controlled by our soil and having to modify it. You can just put a good quality potting soil in there, soil problem solved, And of course, the other thing you have to have is a drainage hole in the bottom of the pot, because that's what makes everything work, is excess water drains away.
How big a pot would you have traveled that leopard?
That one, this one, that's in about a 10-inch pot. You could do it it'd stay in that for a while, but a 12-inch pot would take it for a long time. Yeah. And I think I mentioned last week in the container class that I had, I've got a hydrangea that I've had in a 20-inch pot for 12 years. And it's about to the point of needing repotting, but not actually needing to go to a different pot. It's just the soil has decomposed and settled to the point that I just need to take it out and add more soil and bring it up. And it'll be good in that same pot for probably another 12 years. So, but when in doubt, between this pot and a little bit larger pot, typically go to the larger pot. But you don't want to go huge, because if you put it in a pot and it's like, it'll never fill that pot. Within that pot's too big. It won't look right. You want things to be in scale. And also, you want to be able to manage the water situation. And if you have small plants in a huge pot, it just makes life more difficult. And let's see. And here's one that's kind of the charter member of the, looks tropical, but it's not. Japanese Aurelia. Huge leaves. It's an evergreen. It's winter hardy. And of course, this is another example of, as plants go, this guy, for Japanese Aurelia, this is a baby. And so, when you're a baby, your hands are a little bitty. And when you're a baby plant, your leaves are a lot smaller than they're going to be as an adult. As an older specimen, this guy could have a leaf that would cover the whole top of this thing. But big, bold foliage, happy with shade, could take some morning sun, but they're made for shade, so they're not going to take our midday and afternoon sun. But gets to be a pretty big plant. But you could also do it in a pot. And of course, really big things that you put in pots, that's going to limit their size, just being in a pot. So that makes them manageable. Of course, the other big bonus, if you have things in pot, you can scoot them around. See, a lot of things in the spring, April and May, could actually take full sun because it's not that intense. But then when you get to be July, they want some protection. And let's see. I have any. Oh, here's another one in the category. This is a cast iron plant. What does that suggest? You're going to have to try hard to kill it. You can, but you'd have to work at it. So this one is a dwarf variety. I think it'll get about 1.5 feet tall, called Tiny Tank. And evergreen, winter hardy here. In fact, the larger variety, it'll get 3 feet tall. Leaves will get that wide, very big. And of course, this one could actually be done as a house plant. Low water use, like a lot of shade things, and foliage is it. That's its claim to fame. But very, very tough and dependable. And let's see if we have anything else in the category. Well, we have one back here. This is a little gem magnolia. It's got pretty big leaves and really big blooms, a great scent. And of course, the other thing that I mentioned on this guy is this is one of those plants that gives you a sense of place. If you're around a magnolia, you're in the South. If you're in Nebraska, you're not going to see little gem magnolias. They are creatures of the South. Of course, one of its relatives, the magnolias called tulip trees or Solangiana, which are deciduous magnolias, they also are a neat thing that's in this category because a lot of them have really big leaves, bigger than this by far. And they're kind of soft and they're medium green. And although they bloom in the winter before they even put on foliage, they're kind of the quintessential up north blooming plant that will do in Nebraska. When they get past that and they get into the season, their leaves are big and medium green, some of them kind of light green, especially the new growth, and kind of soft looking. They would fit right into a tropical looking group. So they're kind of, I call them the split personalities. And when you see some of them in full foliage, to me, that's the immediate thing I think of is that would look neat in a bigger item in a tropical grouping. It would not look out of place at all, although it is nowhere near tropical. Okay, and of course, here's another guy that I guess could be included in it looks tropical, but it's not. And this is, you see we have some buds here. This is a tropical hibiscus. There's for a close-up. Big blooms, this big. It's a commonly referred to as perennial hibiscus. These in January, the top of it is going to disappear. And it won't come back until probably the latter part of April, because perennials that are extremely tolerant of heat, they don't do cold. And in April, and this year even May, you have some pretty chilly nights hanging around. So in April, when you have a night of 45 degrees, this guy may be wanting to come out of the ground, but one 45-degree night, and he's like, I'm holding off. I'm going to wait till the nights are consistently warm, and when that happens, then they explode. They're already in bud, and it'll love the heat through the summer. Sun all day long, bloom all through the summer into the fall. And of course, this is a variety that kind of a medium pink. If they're a medium pink or red, a lot of them have the foliage that looks neat. Kind of a red tinge to it. Of course, some of them are light green. You can have white, pink, red, all sorts of colors, but they're all big. and a very dramatic plant. So it fits right into the sunny tropical look. And I think we just about, yeah, we're as good as exhausted of that group. Now we're moving on. That's my alarm that tells me to continue to move along. Sure.
Tropical hibiscus. I have one in a pot from last year, and we've had it in a pot. This will be the
Right.
third year now.
Right.
It sets buds, but the buds fall off.
Well, there are two things there. If it's a tropical hibiscus, dropping buds is part of being a tropical hibiscus. They will set more buds than they open. That just, even at their happiest, they do that. And then the second thing that contributes to that is if you have a tropical hibiscus, in a pot and you don't have a greenhouse and it sees some cold, not freezing, but colder than it would like, that sets it back as far as when things warm up, it's slower to start blooming again. If you wintered it in a warm greenhouse, it'll start blooming right on time. But when it's seeing, not freezing temperatures, but chillier than it would like, it kind of retards its performance in the following season. Yeah. Sure. And now we're into bold. And we have, I guess, 5 or 6 varieties of elephant ears. And they also have pretty neat names. Yucatan Princess. Okay, talk me into it. And this guy, let's see what they... And of course, to me too, if it's a strange color, which to me that is, well, that's exotic. It's not just plain Jane green. It's kind of like, what would you call that? And if you're saying, you look at something and you say, what would you call that? Well, by definition, it's exotic, isn't it? It's out of the ordinary. And this guy, zone 9, so it'll freeze back to the ground. And on something like that, put some deep coarse mulch over it in the winter to give it its best chance of coming back. Pardon?
Can it take the summer?
Well, it can take the summer, the heat, fine. It would, just about any of these, shade would be fine. Now, some of them are not as tolerant of sun, but of course, with anything, these things, they like moisture. So the more sun they're in, they're going to want a drink. Now, they're not aquatic. They're not, at the edge of a pond, but they don't want to go dry. So keep that in mind. And this one is a zone 8. We're zone 8. And the average low temperature in zone 8, 10 to 20 degrees. So it'll, and of course this one, I don't think I said it, and this one, Mayan mask, which, you see, that one is kind of like the next one. I'm going to tell you a horticultural term that these elicit after I show you this next one. And that one's name is Mojito. Mojito. And that horticultural term that I was talking about is cool. Did you know that was a horticultural term? Cool. Cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. That's, yeah. If you go to the college to horticultural, they'll teach you that.
Well, those people are telling you you're better in some sun, but not like all day sun, right?
They're not gonna miss all day sun, you know. But which is not to say they can't do it, but you know, our sun is pretty intense. So if it's partial, then a lot of things that can take all day sun, if they get a little bit of break in the afternoon, it's kind of like, okay, that's better. You know, they would live through it. They might look a little better with a little bit of a break. But when they're in full sun, the things that are in full sun, the margin for error, they want what they want. And when they're in full sun, best that they get it, or they could look, you know, stressed. Okay, well, it's time to shift some items. Here's some full sun guys. Here's a frequent appearing member. The bat-faced kufia. There he is with his ears standing up. Loves heat, blooms all through the summer into the fall, and he'll get up and wide and kind of fall over, but very.
I'm going to show her the bathroom.
There we go. And then, of course, another type of kufia, the Mexican heather. And of course, it's I mentioned it before that it's not a standalone plant, but it is one of the great companion plants. By itself, it's not that much, but when you put it around something else, it kind of perks everything up. Very tough, and is a this one is going to typically be a perennial. It'll freeze to the ground, and you just cut it off, and it, you know, not everything's an absolute, but typically he's going to come back. But like I say, like the others, if it's a hot weather thing, they're not going to be back in March, so don't give up and jerk it out. Oh, bat-faced kufia. Okay. And okay, and of course, 10:37. Okay, I'm good on time. I get nervous about it's going to go bing or over. Okay, and talk about some hot weather performers. These are Esperanza, and this is an orange, a little bit smaller bloom than the yellow. And I've got another yellow one. And let's see if this is this one is named variety Lydia. And as you can see, blooming its head off, and it can't get too hot or too sunny. These are some that are like all day sun, absolutely just fine. In fact, I had one of these, I think I mentioned before, that had one of those in a container over here on the south side of the building, and through mid-July it was a real performer. And then from the middle of July on into the fall, it achieved overachiever status, because it started growing bigger and blooming even more. And you know, these guys, 110, it's like, yeah, okay, let's do this again tomorrow. So not everybody needs a break, and these guys are very tough. Of course, when these get finished, it'll start to try to make beans, which you can just trim it out right there, and typically it's got buds. Here's some buds already coming. So you don't have them out there to make beans. So once the blooms are finished, and here's one right here that's done, you know, off to the compost pile for that. And they just keep blooming their heads off. They're technically, this is a tropical tree, or big shrub or tree. And here, typically, they're going to freeze to the ground in the winter. But they can. In fact, a few years ago, I was walking my dog in the neighborhood behind me, and there was one there that was about 12 feet tall. It was one of the yellow ones. And I don't know how he got it to be that big, but it probably been there for a few years. Once things have a big root base, when it warms up, they can grow like gangbusters. And I don't have one here, but another one that's in that category, I've have it on my list, is just a regular fig, you know, like Celeste or Brown Turkey or whatever. I planted one at my daughter's house a couple years ago, and before the big bad freeze, which took it to the ground, and it had only been in the ground since April, and went through, and in February froze to the ground, and then by the end of the following summer, it was back 7 feet tall with multiple stalks. And I just saw it yesterday. Now this year, the second year, it's got about 12 of them, and it's 10 feet wide and 8 feet tall. And the neat thing about it, the reason I included it on the list, is it has big bold leaves. Even if it didn't bear fruit, you know, just for the big bold leaves, it's worth having around. A neat background, and grows quick. And I used to be concerned about, well, yeah, but you know, they're subject to freezing to the ground. They don't do it very much, but it could happen. My concern about that has evaporated, because once they put on a root base, they're going to come back gangbusters. So a gorgeous plant, especially if you like figs. Okay. Now we're going to talk about big bold leaves that are tropicals. Philodendron, this one called Salome with the big fingers. Boy, that one says tropical like nobody's business. And then, of course, a red bamboo. And another bamboo. And an ornamental variegated bamboo. Of course, he's got pentas around him, which love sun, bloom all through the summer into the fall. And of course, the red bamboo, that's a non-clumping. It's going to be a single plant, but it can get pretty big, depending on, I mean, it can go over 10 feet, depending on how happy it is. Of course, another thing to mention on the bamboos is best if you have a place that's somewhat protected from the wind. The wind isn't going to kill them, but it'll split the leaves. They won't look as neat. So if you have a location that's a little bit protected from the wind, they'll look better. And let's see. Who do we have? And of course, this is our jumper from earlier. Jumped off the cart. Fiddly fig, you know, it's a tropical, but of course the people ask me, well, can that take our heat? Well, it couldn't take our full sun, but it can take our heat. So that's out in the patio, in the shade. And another thing, of course, if you can, out of the wind, since that can beat them up. But nothing says tropical like a big bold foliage. And of course, like some of our evergreen shrubs that aren't tropical at all, to have big bold green leaves, that helps to set off, other things of color that are around it. Anything with a neat green background, it kind of heightens the effect. Or speaking of philodendrons, it's a Swiss cheese, a neat hanging basket item. So, yes, this can be a house plant. Of course, this mainly is a house plant for us. And of course, the same thing with the Salome. But guys like this, they really enjoy the summer out in the shade. And let's see. This is just another example of variegation says exotic. That's a calathea done as house plant, but could do the patio. And then, of course, if somebody says, I want some things that we'll do in the shade and are tropical, but need very little care, you can't get much less care than Sansevieria, also called mother-in-law's tongue, or, and I don't know why that would be, or a snake plant. That's like the time that I told my mother-in-law, after I've been married for about 20 years, I said, marrying your daughter is about the smartest thing I ever did. And she looked at me like, you're not telling me you've just come to this conclusion, are you? But anyway, variegation and a very tough plant, looks exotic. If you kill this one, you should collect rocks and things like that, or get into garden art, sculpting or something. But looks really neat. Low care, low water. This guy, if it got water once a month, it's going to be happy. You could probably water it a little more if you had it outside, but don't keep it moist, or when you pull on a leaf, it's going to come out because it will have rotted. So kind of similar to if you have an aloe vera, same kind of deal. Don't water it very often, or you're going to have used to have had one because it's going away. But a bunch of different colors. Some of them have a bunch of yellow in them, but a neat look. I've got a book that shows one of the neatest uses of this. It has some architectural stuff, plate window that goes to the floor, and a sunken bed in the living room. It had a row of these going up to the window, and then on the deck outside, it continued. So you could, inside and outside was a blur because he had the same thing, a row of them that just went right through the glass and into the living room, a neat plant. Let's see. Dragon wing begonia. It's an annual. This is a plant that there is a real horticultural term. I'm not kidding you now. Choice. So if something is considered choice, a red banana, that's considered choice. It's just a super special plant that is just, it's like, it doesn't get any better than this for that kind of plant. This is a begonia, dragon wing begonia. Big bold foliage. As they get bigger, the blooms are in chains. It can get more than 2 feet tall, 2 or 3 feet wide. The reds can take a fair amount of sun, although they don't want all afternoon. There's also a pink variety, and it's pretty much strictly shade. Can't take as much sun. Still have time, but I'm getting close. And but that one is just a gorgeous plant. And of course, you can't talk tropicals without talking bougainvillea. And of course, typically around here, most of the ones that you see and that we sell are hanging baskets, and they do love sun and heat. So they don't absolutely have to have it, but they'll cope and they bloom.
So why are they mostly in baskets?
They don't do cold.
They don't do cold.
So it had to be a container or a hanging basket. And of course, most of them, although I'm looking, I'm not seeing them, but they're in there somewhere. Yep, there's one. Most of them, they have thorns. So I say they bite. So if they're in a hanging basket, you're a little bit less likely to be bit. But if it's in a pot on the patio and you walk by, you will discover they have thorns. But gorgeous colors, and just when they're in full bloom, just over the top. Of course, these are back to the category of look tropical but aren't. Of course, they would perform in the tropics, but these are cannas. They'll freeze to the ground in the winter, but they are dependable about coming back. These are the buds. This one blooms orange, and that's a Tropicana black, dark foliage, bright orange bloom. And then we're back into my definition of exotic. Man, if it's got variegated foliage, it looks like something special. And of course, this guy, Tropicana Gold, and of course, not in bloom just yet, but, you know, gold foliage. So these with bananas, other big leaf things. You know, it looks the part. And that guy, let me see if I can. Oop, I threw my eyeballs on the table somewhere. Here they are. Four to 6 feet. A lot of the ones that have come out, a lot of the cannas that have come out in recent years are dwarf. You know, a bunch of the old style, you know, they would go 8 feet. You know, a lot of them more recent are more compact. So, you know, look at the tag to see what you're getting. Well, I'll continue in that category. It looks tropical, but not. Turk's cap. And this is a dependable perennial, and it'll do sun or it'll function in quite a bit of shade. I've got some at my house in the back that are in more shade than sun. And they, we got things going on here. But they're not budding up yet. It won't be too long. Of course, this is a another example of, and of course hummingbirds love these. So if you want to have some exotics, nothing like hummingbirds floating around to give it a look. This is another example of, this is a baby. Those leaves are small. The ones in my yard, they've already got leaves, that big because they're mature. So in the ground, and they'll freeze back to the ground. But the one I had, I guess a bird planted it, and it's probably been about 12 years ago, and it's about 10 feet by 10 feet and 3 to 4 feet high. And that's, remember, and so some people say, oh, I wouldn't want that in my yard. It's 10 or 12 years, and I haven't done anything to restrain it. So it's not like it's going to crawl into your house and grab you at night, They do what you let them do. But anyway, it's just, it freezes back to the ground. And of course, after we had the freeze, the real bad freeze, came back, I think, even better than before. So it's not going away. Big bold leaves. Of course, the thing I mentioned at the beginning, with foliage and flowers and, color, texture, form. Now, that's what you call form. That's not your everyday bloom. And actually, this yellow part, that's not the bloom. The bloom is the little white flower. And that's where the hummingbird comes to, is the little white flower. But that's a shrimp plant, and he's not going to get that big, a couple feet maybe, but it's relatively compact. And it will, all afternoon sun would probably be more than he'd like, but he could do it. In fact, I saw some recently that were planted in full sun, but of course that would be a case of they want to have adequate moisture, but they could do part sun or bright shade and still look good. And of course the thing on those is don't keep them soggy. Water them when they need it, which is kind of, you can almost say that about anything, but these guys, if you keep them soggy, they get unhappy about it. So those are a tropical, so you'd need to protect that one. And here's another one. You don't see these as much around anymore, but that's copper plant. It's an annual, and it's love. This is another one that's sun all day. It's like, yeah, I would prefer that. It just loves the heat and sun. There are a bunch of different varieties, exotic colors. Of course, it's got it made on exotic colors and variegation, and that guy is another one that's and it'll vary a little bit by variety. That's my trick. Everybody knows that, right? You look through a little slit, and it focuses your eye. So that's my other pair of eyeballs, is looking between my fingers. This one like 4 feet by 4 feet. Loves the heat. In fact, he doesn't get really happy until the heat shows up. Of course, here's another one. That's another example of form is neat. And this is a cyperus. And he likes moisture. Doesn't want to go dry. And this one is, he's got another name, Prince Tut. So there's, its claim to fame is this. Not gonna, but as form goes, that one, that's in the top 5 of form. I mean, that gets your attention. You see that and you're looking at something different. That is pretty cool. Yeah, and these can cope with a bog area. They can. take it moist. They don't want to be super stagnant, but they can take a pretty good amount of moisture. Oh. Uh-oh. It's a jungle out here. This guy. And of course, these are annuals, New Guinean patients. And I brought them because, you know, another thing that says exotic is color. And to me, nothing says exotic color like orange. And the neat thing is on this one, and I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but if you look close, right in the very middle of that orange, it's pink. You see it? There's just a little speck of pink in the middle. And if orange is exotic, well then orange with pink, now that's really exotic. And then of course, this guy, he's exotic with just one color. And then he's a little bit softer, more of a salmon. And if it's in the shade, you want to lighten it up, there you go, with just white. And then this one is the name on this, Orange Marmalade. And that's a Chrysandra. It's a tropical.
Will those all bloom till the winter?
They will. And here we go. I've got some of these in this plant right here that I packed up just to bring back here. Oh. Oh. You could say, what will they think of next? The good thing is I don't have to think. I just have to wander around and pick up all these cool plants. If it was up to me to think it up, see, not only did I not make this stuff up, I don't have to make this stuff up. I just wander around and pick it up. This is a fan flower, full to part sun. And this is a white version. It also comes in a blue. And that
Watering with those, do they get?
They're a little bit touchy about that. You know, you keep these soggy and they go away, you know. But they love the sun, and these can be done in a hanging basket. But they're a neat companion to other plants, or what was that term I mentioned earlier? Echo. See a little white and a little white there. It kind of ties it together, and it's like, and a lot of times when you look at it and it's appealing and you don't know what is it exactly that makes it, you know, click. Well, then if you pull something out and you go, oh, that's what it was, that little echo, you know, it's not there. That one, it spreads, and it can be done in a hanging basket. It'll trail over. And then, of course, the quintessential, you know, color, chartreuse, just potato vine. And that's one that, you know, you can put it with a bunch of stuff, and it's, you know, it's going to set it off. And that color, particular color, it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like, you know. Then here we have something with, you know, there are plants that have potential, and there are plants that have mainly potential, because this is such a baby, but it's a candle tree, and not a name variety, just we planted, or our Ed, you know, our merchandise guy here, he planted these on either side of our driveway out front, and I guess that's been 4 or 5 years ago. Time flies, maybe 6, I don't know. But anyway, just planted, I think, a couple of these on either side. And this guy will do, I think they did about 8 feet tall and 10 feet wide. And you have to have some patience because they kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And of course, we were looking forward to the bloom. They do little chains of yellow bloom. And it took forever. But in the early fall, you know, when they were 7 or 8 feet tall, they came into bloom. And if you want something with some drama and you're patient, or if you have children or grandchildren and want something to watch and teach patience, you know, this is it. You could. It will still bloom. It might not get as big, but they will get huge. So all day.
I looked for him on the way in today.
All day, all day, because the you want them to grow as fast as possible. So from sun up to sundown, all the better, and they're pretty neat. And if you wanted to, I've had this fantasy that I'm going to do this someday. Is I'm going to have this lounging chair. And it's going to be where I have to kind of weave my way in. And then I lay down in this lounging chair, and there are all these different kinds of foliage above me that I see the different colors of things. And two good things. I won't get sunburned in there. And if I don't want anybody to find me, they won't, you know. But this one would be a candidate for part of that planting. And I would be lashed if I didn't have a mention of mandevillas. And this one's a Bella White, kind of a vining one. And here we have a red. And what's its name? Bella Hot Pink. And there you go. Now, that makes you kind of, these will take full to part sun. And of course, this one, you almost feel a little bit like you're already in Miami, don't you? You know? Those are neat. And then if you just want to put an exotic thing in there, this is not a tropical, it's an annual, but it's got cool foliage. Senecio angel wings, just for something different. And part sun, or it could probably do in light shade, would still work. Just water it enough to keep it going. Don't keep it soggy. And I think I've run out of plants. And man, it could be, don't tell me, well, 11:08. That's on time for me. Thanks for visiting.